Improvement Plan public consultation. My name is Chris McGuire. I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. On October 11th, 2022, we acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. From that, we'll take amendments to the agenda. I don't see any disclosure of monetary interest. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I need to declare on this item, the public meeting regarding the CIP. I am both a landowner within the designated area and would be the recipient of grants available for specific properties, but I am also currently employing Rory to do a similar project in Carleton Place.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dwyer. We don't have anything else other than a priority issue 8.1 for this meeting. So Carl and Mary have given me a script to start with. So we will now, if you want to turn off your camera, Councillor Dwyer, we'll now open the virtual statutory public meeting portion of the committee of the whole meeting. The purpose of the statutory public meeting is to provide an opportunity for members of the community to be involved in the community improvement plan project and provide input on the final draft policy. As per the Planning Act, if a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the town of Smith Falls to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make a written submission to the town of Smith Falls before the proposed community improvement plan is adopted, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Smith Falls before the proposed community improvement plan is adopted, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or the public body as a party. I will now pass the meeting over to Senior Planner Carl Grenke to give a brief overview of the project and introduce the consulting team at Dillon Consulting who have prepared the presentation, giving an overview of the final draft community improvement plan. There will be an opportunity for participants to ask questions and give feedback following the presentation. So Senior Planner Grenke, are you with us tonight? Great.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, committee and members of the public who have signed in and watching from home. I'm very pleased to introduce to you Rory Baksh and Megan Reddy from Dillon Consultants, who've been working with the town and town staff and stakeholders on this very important project since early this year. And as will be described to you in a moment, the community improvement plan, the draft community improvement plan is a very broad and far-reaching document that articulates councils and the municipalities' desire and targets specific community improvements to improve the overall look, feel, and in context of our town. So I will now pass that over to Dillon Consulting, who have a presentation that they will be delivering. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carl, for the kind introduction. And while I say some opening remarks, Megan's going to take a moment to get the PowerPoint slides cast onto the screen. And a warm good evening. And I hope that everyone here on council, members of staff, and in the community enjoyed a very pleasant Thanksgiving holiday. Certainly, I can't believe that we are finding ourselves at Thanksgiving. The year has certainly flown by, but it means it's simply Halloween and then on to Christmas. And those are exciting holidays unto themselves. So after a fairly extensive amount of work, I'm very pleased to present to this statutory public meeting the Town of Smith Falls Community Improvement Plan. As a statutory public meeting, this is the final formal opportunity for any citizen to provide further comment for the consideration of council and for members of council to ask questions. And we certainly do welcome that because we are at a statutory public meeting. You might notice that there's 49 individual slides, and I will try my best to manage a pace of this content such that as a registered professional planner in Ontario, I strike a chord by providing good information while at the same time, hopefully effective communication onto the merits of the community improvement plan and the way that it's been structured. So perhaps without any further ado, I will continue forward. So obviously what I'd like to do is for anyone that may be joining us late in this process to provide a bit of an overview on the project and how we find ourselves with a draft CIP before us at our statutory public meeting this evening, and then actually do a fairly paced walkthrough of the financial incentive programs, as well as the municipal leadership strategy, highlighting the two most powerful tools that we have in Ontario under the Planning Act to create transformative change in our communities. So next slide, Megan. I would like to acknowledge the high level of collaboration that we have enjoyed. I must say, without any uncertainty, the extensive efforts of Mary Remig and Carl Grenke and Julie Crowder in collaborating with the team and providing information, as well as the interaction that we enjoyed with the community throughout the course of our other consultation activities truly benefited it. We've done a lot of learning about Smiths Falls through the course of this process, and with a desire to calibrate the financial incentives ideally suited for the community going forward. And again, my kind thanks to the excellent collaboration that we've enjoyed. So what is a community improvement plan? For those that are unfamiliar with the term, it is a tool under the Planning Act in Ontario that allows a municipality to provide incentives, predominantly financial incentives, in areas that need funding and or attention. There's generally a prohibition in Ontario for municipalities to just give money away willy-nilly, and this is one of the one very significant vehicle that that remains. It's through this community improvement plan process that you're able to identify priorities and then make financial incentives available to make important things happen in the community. And it's a very powerful tool that's been used for many, many years across Ontario. And I'm proud to say that this community improvement plan brings forward a number of kind of best practice tools and then embraces some new challenges for the future. And that makes it a very exciting community improvement plan for Smiths Falls. And I look forward to telling you more about it as our evening continues forward. And so what is the municipal leadership strategy? So while the focus of a community improvement plan for most agencies and individual landowners that are looking to take advantage of the financial incentives, while those financial incentives tend to be the focus, there's another piece. A community improvement plan is also an opportunity to set priorities and have a plan for other changes to happen. Those changes are squarely in the hands of the municipality, but it's nice to know that there's an ongoing suite of public investments or further study to be done to continue the trajectory of positive change. And that really together brings to both the private sector and the public sector to help transform and change a community and help it grow in the right ways. And so it's these complementary efforts that ultimately work together to create this overall improvement and enhance the community. As we were asked to support Smiths Falls through the course of preparing a community improvement plan, there's 4 focus areas, and I'd like to acknowledge and speak to each of those very briefly. So the first one is Brownfield Development, and Brownfield may be a bit of a technical term, but we essentially know those to be underutilized land. That land is, in many cases, when we say the word Brownfield, it may have been previously developed, it may be vacant, and it may be contaminated. And if that is indeed the case, there's quite a bit of work required under the rules in Ontario to actually turn over a brownfield site, from the steps of assessment through to remediation, and then the redevelopment. And so that is one of our areas of focus in order to help bring to life any underutilized land in Smiths Falls. The next one is downtown and waterfront area revitalization. This is one of those classic CIP areas that's been used year in and year out. I've done a lot of this in my own work as a planner across Southern Ontario for the last 2.5 decades, helping to create vibrant downtown and waterfront areas. Our focus here is on predominantly the buildings, trying to get those buildings to be renovated, trying to get storefronts to turn over. Those storefronts are referred to as facades. So we have various facade programs, signage, elements of landscaping sometimes, all about creating a more inviting, vibrant atmosphere to continue to invest in the heart of our community, our downtown and or Main Street. And becomes very important as the community grows and changes to have a vibrant, healthy, prosperous downtown. Our third area of focus is universal accessibility. So this is one of the newer topic areas we're seeing community improvement plans move towards. I was proud to be part of this emergent work many years ago. Before we were thinking about accessibility, I had an opportunity to start building this in, and I'm glad now that it's 2022, we're beginning to see more around the universal accessibility, trying to encourage both the exterior and the interior of buildings to be renovated so that they can be barrier-free for everyone, regardless of age or ability. And then our fourth, and certainly not our least, area of focus is on attainable housing. You may have also heard the word affordable. We're using the word attainable and affordable interchangeably in this particular community improvement plan. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage more of this type of housing to be built, to encourage a greater range and mix of housing types, and to provide an opportunity for those to have housing that allows them to age in place. Whether or not you're a young person striking out on your own, you have a housing option that's affordable to you or attainable to you, or whether or not you happen to be an empty nester and you're looking to downsize, you still actually need attainable housing, and to make sure that that is available to you throughout the entire life cycle here. We are in particular speaking about no more than 30% of a household's gross income being spent on housing costs, excluding utilities. And as everyone, I think, is quite well aware of the housing crisis that we face in Ontario, this has been a very present challenge, and we hope to be an active participant in solving this challenge for Smiths Falls through the incentives that are offered in this community improvement plan. Megan, we'll keep going. So as you've heard me allude to, lots of benefits here coming from a community improvement plan, investments in homes and businesses and properties, beautification, creating vibrancy and business vitality, helping to expand housing options that are attainable by residents, and turning over underutilized lands. These are all very important goals for a community as it continues to grow, develop, and change over time. And as you've heard me say, there are various community improvement plans around Ontario. The key is to make sure that it fits your community and that it suits what your community needs are. And so this one, I do believe, reflects the priorities of the community based on what we've understood and what we've been able to learn through our consultation. You will find out very quickly that it has a very dynamic approach in the way that it looks at funding and is multifaceted in that regard. We've been able to learn from existing downtown and waterfront area past revitalization efforts, and we're expanding and improving upon that. And ultimately, all of this can contribute to economic stimulus. And I have yet to meet a community that is not interested in economic stimulus. And I think this is an excellent upside of a community improvement plan as well. And so here we are, after many months of work, beginning in spring, we find ourselves in a very advantageous position to see a final draft of this community improvement plan and bring the Smiths Falls to the position of potentially being able to approve the community improvement plan. So again, my thanks to staff's hard work in helping us get to this point. It's been a great partnership. So on the way to this community improvement plan, we did all of the necessary homework that good planning practice requires in Ontario to put these plans together. You've heard me make reference to public consultation, but there was previous reviews conducted of various bylaws and policies, and individual conversations with stakeholders as well as virtual public information centers, polling and the like. And so again, that has provided valuable information to help shape this community improvement plan. Certainly when we set out on the exercise, we had some goals and we had some things in mind. We're pleased to hear that engagement resonated with those. There is a desire for diversity and good quality design in the downtown core. There is a desire to preserve heritage character. There is a desire to eliminate barriers to accessibility, and there is a desire to see a wider range of housing type and tenure, and again, to make housing attainable. And so I think we set out with good intentions, and those good intentions were reciprocated through the course of this process and what we heard through engagement. And that, to me, reaffirms that we're headed down the right road here. As we think about community improvement, the tools that we have in Ontario allow a municipality to identify various areas and sub-areas for community improvement. In this particular case, we have identified 2 functional areas, and there's a broader townwide area for eligibility and then a more focused area. So as you see here, this is the extent of the jurisdiction of the municipality, where the community improvement plan speaks about the brownfield financial incentives, the accessibility and the attainable housing programs. Please keep in mind that those programs would be available across the full extent of the municipality, wherever those land uses would be able to take advantage of those. And then we have a sub area, which I believe is on the next slide. This is specifically for the downtown core and waterfront area, which I think does make sense. Here we have the core area of the community, the historic Main Street area, those shops and services that form the heart of the community, where we want to see continued building revitalization, building investment. And so for those programs related to the downtown and waterfront area, they would focus in on that particular sub area of the community. And in my experience, having run community improvement plans and worked as a downtown development officer, there is a benefit in having a bit of a cluster in your downtown with these incentive programs. You get a number of stores turning over. Once you get past a handful of them, suddenly all of Main Street just feels totally different and it comes alive. So this is a great way to make sure that we are using our tools as best as possible.
Right.
Someone has their microphone on, if they can turn it off.
That's all right. You might as well get it done.
Mr. Reed, could you please turn off your microphone?
Yeah. Just a second.
As you heard me say, there is benefit in focusing on the downtown and waterfront sub area for financial incentive programs. These ones are very key. There's the facade, building signage, landscaping, improvement programs, and restorations and renovations to interiors of buildings. This is particularly beneficial for trying to rehabilitate building stock and create good space for new commercial tenants to occupy. So again, these are new and innovative programs, in particular the interior building program, and I think will have a big difference in the community over the full passage of time. So now I'd like to move us through a bit of a walkthrough of the CIP in greater detail and speak to you about the financial incentive programs and the eligibility criteria, and then move on from there to the leadership strategy and how a CIP is implemented and funded. The reason I'm pausing to go over the financial incentive programs and the eligibility criteria is key to the nature of a community improvement plan. As you heard me say, municipalities are not able to just randomly give out money for certain development initiatives unless it's operationalized through a CIP. For this to happen, we have to have certain rules in place. And the amount of money that is being offered in some cases is very strategic. And so I think it's important for decision makers and members of the community to understand the type of investment that is being expected and who's in and who's out, who the rules apply to, and who's able to benefit, since there is a very important public interest matter here that we're trying to serve. So as you heard me say, the broad focus financial incentive programs are for brownfields, accessibility, and attainable housing. And it does fall entirely within the purview of the municipal boundaries. And then we'll move on. So let's do the brownfield development. And as I said, I do want to provide good information for the benefit of those present. The brownfield incentive programs follow a very strong suite of programs intended to support the turnover of underutilized land that may be contaminated in the municipality. And so I will do a quick walkthrough of these. So with maybe a bit of a sidebar on financial incentive programs before I do that, is while it seems like there are a lot of programs here, as I get through them all, the thing I'd like to remind members of council and the community at this time is not all of them have to turn on the first day. And this is a conversation I've been having with staff through the course of this exercise. We retain still as Smiths Falls the opportunity to continue to set priorities and shape the way forward. And if it turns out that there's an area that is of particular focus and interest that you'd like to put funding behind and see those launch first, we have the liberties to be able to do so. And as things begin to change and move in the right direction in the community, and you choose to bring other programs online, we have the ability to do so. The reason the CIP is so broad in the way that the programs have been designed is we're essentially trying to give you what I would characterize as almost a lifetime CIP. This should serve your needs for at least a decade, if not longer, with a wide range of programs that you can turn on and off as the future holds. And I think there's huge value in being ready for the future and just having these programs at your fingertips when you need them. So with that sidebar, I'd like to circle back to the brownfield programs and quickly go over these 5 here. So the first one is the environmental site assessment rebate. I think we have a bit more information on the next slide, Megan. Right, and then some information on the other ones as well. So there is a maximum funding threshold of $25,000 per study, up to a maximum of $40,000 if this program is made available, with a requirement that the required study that would be undertaken in Ontario, called a Phase 1 environmental site assessment, indicates that there's a need for this further study. And these are not small amounts, but they're also not unusual amounts in the business of trying to turn over a formerly contaminated site. We have a team of hydrogeologists that do this type of work here at Dillon Consulting, and it is a very expensive proposition if you have a formerly contaminated site. The costs have since gone up through new regulation as it relates to dealing with excess soil, and so it's important that the funding levels are indicative of the costs for these types of things. Moving on, if we are able to encourage an underutilized site to turn over, we have on offer a brownfield tax increment rebate program. This means that if they were able to redevelop the site, they're going to be paying higher taxes because the site's been reassessed. But because there was a public interest in rehabilitating and turning over an underutilized site and re-knitting it into the fabric of the community, so now we have a vibrant property instead of one that's sitting there idle, a public interest has been served, and so there's an opportunity to offer them a 50% rebate based on the incremental increase of taxes up to a period of 10 years. And so this is, again, a program that we see quite common in Ontario for brownfield, and the 50% is, I think, a smart way to go about doing this, because there is an incremental tax increase that you benefit from as a municipality. So you keep 50% of that increment, and the developer that did the brownfield redevelopment that contributed to revitalizing your community, they get a benefit as well. Our third program are the building permit fee and planning application fee rebates. Again, customary program we see in Ontario for brownfield. in exchange for rehabilitating an underutilized site and bringing it back to vibrancy in our community, I'm offering a rebate of those fees up to a maximum of $50,000. And in this case, it's a matter of foregoing revenue, similar to the tax increment rebate. The DC deferral program assists with managing the costs of development. Development charges are a fairly substantial amount of money that a developer will pay to the municipality to cover the cost of infrastructure, as many on council may be aware of. And so this allows them to put off the payment of that for 24 months without interest. It assists with cash flow on a very challenging redevelopment project, and that can help the viability of that project. And then the last in our 5 is a universal attainable housing co-application. So I'm going to speak about the attainable housing a bit later on, but simply put, if you're going to revitalize a site and bring it back to vibrancy in the community, and at the same time incorporate attainable housing units within that, then there's an opportunity to stack both the brownfield and the attainable housing programs on top of each other, and optimize the benefits from both of those programs, in which case we see that as really optimizing the potential public interest of both a brownfield development and attainable housing. And again, stay tuned for a bit more of a detailed walkthrough on the attainable housing component of the CIP in just a few minutes. There are rules in Ontario for remediating a brownfield property, so there are various costs that you're able to provide an incentive for and others that you're not. This is made clear in the community improvement plan, and this is consistent with the requirements that we see in Ontario set up by the province for brownfield redevelopment. Moving on to universal accessibility, just a reminder again, these programs, if turned on, would be available to the entirety of the municipality. And there's 2 within this financial incentive package. There's the exterior and the interior, which in and of itself is a little bit self-explanatory, but again, it's important that I do cover some of the details. So I'll speak to the exterior first and then on to the interior. So on the exterior, it's providing those improvements up to a maximum rebate of $15,000, and it's 50% of the cost. So for example, if someone who did not have a wheelchair ramp added a real wheelchair ramp to their building, and they were able to access this program, and the wheelchair ramp cost them $8,000 to put in, just for argument's sake, then under this program, they would be able to receive $4,000. That's the 50%. And there's other things that are needed in the community that we heard, new automatic power doors, widening the doorway opening of a primary entrance, and other changes that meet the requirements of the AODA, that's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and the Ontario Building Code. So again, trying to encourage the building stock to turn over and to be able to offer that full life cycle for all of the people that live in the community, whether it's for today or well into the future. Now, on the interior side, similarly offering an opportunity for interior accessibility improvements to be rebated up to 50% with a maximum of $15,000 should the program be turned on. And things that typically come to mind as an example, but we're not limited here, is bathrooms that are universally accessible. For example, a zero clearance shower is an accessible design feature, widening the interior doorways of passive travel, or in a more elaborate building, even the installation of elevators, which is extremely expensive, and in some cases a barrier for that building owner to make investments, but is much needed. And so that would provide a vehicle for some of these things to happen and help encourage those to move forward. So with attainable housing, again, the focus of this is across the entirety of the municipality, where residential use would be permitted through the official plan and zoning bylaw. And we have 5 programs here. And again, I will offer a fairly brief walkthrough and trying to hit the high points of the various criteria and the thresholds. So the first one is a rebate on development charges. Again, if you're providing attainable housing, serving a very important need, serving the public interest here, offer 50% of those development charges back. So they have to pay all of it, but they're able to apply and get half of that money back, as long as they meet the requirements for attainable rental units. That means they have to be offered at a certain market rent for them to be able to take advantage of this program. And you'll hear me speak about the threshold of market rent as I speak more about the attainable housing, because this is very key for this program to work properly. I'll continue on with the other components of the overall attainable housing package. So there's a building permit fee and planning application fee rebate. Again, if we're able to provide attainable housing and the rents being offered are at the right threshold for attainable housing, that 30% threshold, and there's an incentive here to be offered. So you'll be rebated back the building permit fees and the planning application fees. And these are proportional as well. So for example, if they build a 60 unit building and they provide 30 of those units as attainable, then that's 33% they're eligible to get back. If they build a 20 unit building and they put in 5 attainable units, that's 25% that they're able to get back. Here we have one that is focused specifically on additional residential units. So for a very simple example, consider this a basement apartment. Someone's adding a basement apartment and they believe that they want to participate in the public good of offering attainable housing, and they say, yes, of course, I will offer this at the target rate of 30% of gross household income. And if that's the case, then they are able to access financial incentive programs that support this public interest. So a rebate of $15,000 towards required professional studies or drawings. So that's the maximum threshold there. And the intent there is to make sure that if someone's going to be providing these units, they're properly designed, and those proper drawings can go then to our chief building official for building permit issuance. So that's the kind of inherent trigger there. So we want to make sure that you're not just building something, but you're actually building it properly. If you're going to be doing that, we offer an additional rebate up to $5,000 at 50% of the cost for those construction costs. And furthermore, because we are really also at a drive to create a more sustainable future, a more energy efficient future, if there are improvements made to reduce the carbon footprint of the additional residential unit, then there's an additional $5,000 on offer based on the type of the types of things that are provided. So for example, we still have the option of putting in lower efficiency windows and higher efficiency windows. And if you go to the higher efficiency windows and this rebate is available, then it opens up the opportunity for you to receive a rebate there. As you heard me explain for brownfields, here again, we see the tax increment equivalent rebate for attainable housing. If someone comes into the community, they said, for sure, I will be more than happy to participate with you and I will build attainable housing. We know that their property tax is going to go up. And as a result of that, there's an increment in the amount of property tax that they pay. And if they are able to provide attainable housing, then they're able to get 50% of that increment back. And then again, that is prorated based on the number of attainable housing units that they provide. We need to get stock built, so there has to be a minimum number of units here. Based on my work with developers and how much it costs to do development and what it takes, we know that anyone coming to do this type of development in the community will be building quite a number of units so that they have a blended number of market rate units and attainable housing rate units so that they can meet their profitability objectives. Typically, those that build apartment buildings are building them to hold on to them and see a period of cash flow from them. So this has to work for them financially. And I think this allows that to work and make sense. And again, with a big drive towards accessibility, here we see an opportunity to bundle both attainable housing and accessibility. So if you are providing an attainable housing unit and you are building that housing unit to accessible standards, then there's a further benefit on offer. This is what I would call the unicorn of housing in Ontario. It is difficult to get affordable housing. It is even more difficult to get affordable or attainable housing that is accessible to those that need it. So if anyone is out there willing to participate in this community and build those unicorns, for goodness sakes, let's encourage them to do so, because we will only contribute to making the quality of life of people so much more better by giving them both attainable housing and housing that is accessible for their very special needs. All right, so let's move on to downtown and waterfront. Bring us back to Main Street, that vibrant downtown core, that place where everyone wants to go, for a bite to eat, or just people watch. There's something about a good old-fashioned Main Street that you just can't get anywhere else. And let's see what we're doing for our folks in downtown and waterfront. So a suite of programs around the facades of buildings, trying to get buildings to be continually restored and renovated, and trying to encourage accessibility once again. So here we are on the facade improvement first, and we have a split program, one focused on non-heritage buildings and another focused on heritage buildings. And so perhaps we have a building that is of a particular style and character and someone wants to renovate it and upgrade it. We're very excited about that. Yes, please go ahead. And we have a facade program for on offer for you. 50% of your improvements up to a maximum $20,000 in cost for a maximum rebate of $10,000. So I've done a program like this myself personally. I had a store owner come in, they wanted to change their door, redo their windows, upgrade the materials on the outside to painted wood from an old stucco. They really did a fabulous job. They put in new heritage themed lighting. They spent well over $20,000 in my past experience, and they were happy to receive the $10,000 rebate. So I do know from personal experience that this is well calibrated for downtown revitalization. Now, when we get into heritage designated buildings, these are buildings that are designated under the Heritage Act. It requires a lot more technique and work to renovate a heritage designated building. And so there's greater costs involved, but there's also greater public interest. So we've calibrated it slightly differently. So up to 85% of the costs are eligible. And the maximum rebate of $17,000 per property, really upping the ante here a little bit. But because these buildings are so special and add so much to character, I think that a public interest is well served if this program is made available to continue to support that heritage stock. And I personally have seen heritage stocks just simply degrade over time in Ontario to a point where then the landowner says, well, it's no good anymore, I'm going to tear it down. And this is really designed to curtail that type of phenomenon. And I think this is aligned to the desires and passions of the Smiths Falls community. So as we continue just focused on facade, we also have additional rebates available. So where you engage a heritage professional on a non-heritage building, and bear in mind, what does that mean? So I have a nice building, but I'm going to get a heritage architect to come and tell me how to really make it heritage themed and really, make it truly fit with the heritage of this Main Street. I think that public interest is being served, and we want to encourage people to do this. So this is trying to encourage that behavior. Again, you heard me speak about the importance of being more energy efficient in the future. So if you're going to be installing those higher caliber efficiency windows and doors, then there's an opportunity to receive an additional top up under Rebate 3. And those are all setting us up for a brighter future for tomorrow. And bear in mind that more energy efficient windows and doors actually reduce the operating costs for commercial space. And so by reducing their operating costs, it's a slight contribution to the overall success of the bottom line of that business. So there is a win-win here that is very practical as well. So on the building restoration and renovation and improvement program, now we are focused on the inside of the building. We're looking for major interior renovations, trying to revitalize that building stock and encourage those leasehold improvements to help maintain viable building stock so that it is great space for future businesses or for existing businesses to make those investment choices to continue to upgrade. And we know that interior renovations get expensive very quickly. This, again, is a program that is, I think, right-sized, so up to 50% of the cost to a maximum rebate of $45,000. And this one would be, I think, subject to a fair amount of scrutiny. That's a fairly substantial number, but it's not unusual based on the cost of construction these days. And then again, if you're going to be making a major investment as it relates to interior renovations and it's a heritage designated building that requires specific works to be done, for example, you'll have to go out and get custom millwork done if it's a heritage designated building, then this helps offset those costs because again, you are serving a greater public good here. As you've heard me say, there's a huge push towards accessibility in the downtown and waterfront area. If you're going to be providing accessible investments to your building, then there's an opportunity to receive further top-up funding related to those accessibility improvements. And there's a maximum rebate of up to $15,000 based on 50% of the eligible costs. All right, so I realized that was quite a fast run through of the programs. Hopefully I did hit the high points and try to point out the various characteristics of the programs, the merits underlying them, the various thresholds and the eligibility criteria, but of all means, welcome any questions that we may get as we move forward. I'm just going to do a short pause on the municipal leadership strategy and speak about how we implement community improvement plans, and I welcome any feedback or questions that we may have. They're only a few slides away from the formal presentation wrapping up at this point. So, we did listen carefully to staff and listen carefully to suggestions from the public about where continual investments could be made by the town to support vibrancy, revitalization, quality of life, community pride. And so we've been able to identify a series of strategic opportunities that focus effectively on, the public areas of town and connectivity. And we've tried to put them in a bit of a priority for Smiths Falls to think about and potentially implement in the years ahead. While others out there in the community are using the incentive programs to invest in their buildings. So what does the municipal leadership strategy have in here? Further work on the downtown core design guidelines. The design guidelines are really important to get downtown revitalization in the way and shape that you want it to be. It does help guide character. So it's important to have those in place. More broadly, to have other urban design guidelines that, again, create the right architectural and character expression for the community. As we spoke about attainable housing, staff will need to run calculations every year to determine what the affordable housing or attainable housing rate is based on 30% of household income, and then set that those rental rates in place for those participating in the attainable housing program. And there was a desire to have a new sign bylaw to assist with signage. There's a few more on the municipal leadership strategy. So ongoing investments in accessibility, so things like curb cuts or changing crosswalk times and audible crosswalks are all things that the municipality can continue to do. To partner with local business owners and create mural art. It's something very special that can be done to help contribute to downtown vibrancy or even in other commercial parts of town. We do have a working committee that I'll speak to, and to make sure that they have a good terms of reference in terms of looking at CIP applications and approving them in principle before sending them on for council's final approval. And to encourage and maybe a bigger picture, longer term perspective, planning policy to create more flexibility around the gateways, so the major points of entry into town. and explore how those could potentially come forward and see some transformative change. But that's a much longer, perspective on that one. Alrighty, so here's where the rubber hits the road. So this is about implementing and funding the CIP. So it's great to write this type of plan, but we got to be able to put resources behind it, and we have to know where we're going to launch. So, we think that there is still a pent-up desire for downtown and waterfront revitalization, and we think that could be a main focus. That's certainly what we've heard through engagement. We think that there's a space here for medium-scale projects to be operationalized, and then to see what other smaller projects and larger-scale projects might emerge from that point going forward. And if we're going to be focusing on building improvements, it's important in this particular case, if we're going to launch, to maybe start with the exterior renovations. Those ones are not just benefiting the individual building owner, but everyone that walks by that building sees those improvements. And so that does contribute to the sense of vibrancy. So exterior is a good place to start here. So we have some emergent ideas for how to implement and get us up and running. As it relates to the approval process, it is really important that there is transparency and there is good technical input into the approval of CIP applications. So someone's going to come in and they're going to say, well, we're going to be providing a number of attainable housing units, and I'm going to be doing an apartment building. You want to have the right group of staff involved when they say, when that individual person says, oh, and by the way, can I access your funding program? You definitely want to have the right group of staff involved. And so the way that we've set it up is that there'll be a working committee appointed by council, and they will be looking at those applications, and they will be providing their recommendation if that application should be approved or denied. And they may rely on other outside experts as the case may be. So for example, if it's a brownfield, you may or may not want to get some expert advice as it relates to hydrogeology or risk assessment. If someone's doing a major renovation to a heritage building a number of years from now, and they want to take advantage of one of your heritage programs, you may want to engage a heritage professional to be certain that if you're going to put money behind it, that it actually is the type of thing that you do want to support. So I think the working committee serves a very important purpose in helping bring the CIP to life. Now, there are two exceptions to this, the facade program and the building pardon me. All of the programs are going through the working committee. We actually had a conversation about the appropriateness of individual staff being involved or committee, and we felt that the committee is the best way to go. And then ultimately it goes to town council. And so in terms of funding, this is important. Municipalities need to create a CIP reserve fund and invest into that reserve fund so that as money is being given out, it has an ability to draw on those funds. Having been staff at a municipality, I know that my job when I'm operationalizing a CIP every year is to attempt to estimate the number of programs that I have active and the number of applications I'm going to be receiving and the amount of money that may be going out the door so that I can put in that annual budget request to council and have the money allocated in the reserve fund. And then as I move my way through the year, I receive my applications, I bring it to my working committee. The working committee provides their support, recommendation, and then I have money available to support those applications that we've approved. So that will be part of the annual work of staff moving forward. And then the other thing is staff want to know that we're actually making progress. And so we've set out in the community improvement plan things to monitor: the number of attainable housing units, the value of construction being incentivized, the number of heritage facades being restored, and the number of applications received for each CIP program. What I've explained to staff over the passage of time is you'll see a peak of interest over a period of time, and then interest will begin to wane on some programs. At that point, you may wind those programs down and turn on other ones. And so it's really good to kind of have boots on the ground, close firsthand knowledge of what's happening with your applications, those that are interested, who's going to be coming forward next year, potentially even the year after that. And so on the way to getting our CIP approved and implemented, we find ourselves at this very exciting milestone of having incorporated all the feedback that we've heard thus far. Today is our statutory public meeting day, and we look forward to Council's adoption. Under the Planning Act, there is a statutory appeal period, and then the CIP comes into force. I'm happy to say in the extent of my career, I've not had a CIP appealed. And I'm hoping that we're able to replicate that success here in Smiths Falls again in the days ahead. And with that, I'd like to offer my sincere thanks for everyone's patience as I went through the information in hopefully good detail, and I welcome any other questions or comments that anyone may have. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Rory. So now any members of the public wishing to ask questions or provide feedback on the draft community improvement plan are asked to please raise their hand. I've seen Councillor Allen first.
Yes, I just wanted to say, Rory, this is so well done. And this is something, this is my 12th year on council, and this is something we have been hoping for. And this document is going to, I hope, guide our community in all the areas that it needs to have CIP. I had just one thought or question. In the committee level, when you said we have staff, and I understand the expertise of the staff that would be involved, it's not always easy to have at your in your staff a heritage expert or someone who's even that interested in it. Might not be a bad. We have a really strong heritage committee in our town, and we have had our chair of that committee sometimes consulting just to give us some advice. I'm wondering if that wouldn't be a good person maybe to be on that committee.
Through the chair to the councillor, first, thank you very much for the kind praise. It does mean a lot. And secondly, the working committee that we have established in the CIP policies effectively is your minimum. And should council desire to add additional resources or more representation to the committee, by all means, it's welcome to do so. I'll leave that thought with you.
Thank you.
Councillor Alford.
Yeah, I would echo some of Lorraine's comments. This is almost a panacea for several issues that are important in our town: the climate, accessibility, attainable housing, heritage, non-heritage. So I applaud your efforts to incorporate all of the many facets of things that are important to Smiths Falls in one document. I'm happy with the ability to turn programs on and off, because there is an end to a pool of money. But I think this, you're right, and you said it earlier, I think this CIP could serve us for quite some time. And you have addressed, at least in my mind, all of the things that are front of mind for this council and will probably be front of mind for the next. So thank you, Rory, and I look forward to any potential feedback you get from the public on this. But man, I think you covered most of the bases.
Thank you.
I see Mayor Penko and then Councillor McKenna.
Thanks, Rory. And like it's been said, this is a very exciting program for our community. I'm really eager to see this through, and we know it'll create some really meaningful change over time. A few questions, if you have the opportunity to answer. The first one, under the ARU rebate program, rebate number 3, $5,000 to reduce carbon footprint. You mentioned new windows and doors, but would an air source heat pump also be a qualifying method to qualifying renovation to achieve that grant?
We hadn't included the heat pump. The windows and doors that we have, we are able to make very clear reference to the energy efficiency standards because they existed in a previous federal funding program. And so one of the things that is tricky with the CIP is to make sure that anyone coming to you asking for your money can meet a test, and they can meet that test very clearly. So that's why The heat pump's not in there, but the windows and doors are, because we can tie that to a very specific NRCan energy efficiency target that is very clearly expressed.
Okay, so like I said, a little disappointed with that from the standpoint that we know that a heat pump is obviously a better option than natural gas. And if someone's going to add an addition to their home for an ARU, I would certainly prefer them go with a heat pump versus natural gas.
Yeah, through the chair, you know, there is some amount of flexibility, and I will say in my experience, you know, being staff at a municipality, we have to deal with unique circumstances from time to time. One of the buildings on my main street had a very significant structural issue that negated a certain type of treatment. That was very thoroughly debated and made transparent before funding was issued. And I believe on a case-by-case basis where the public interest is served and there is clear merit, that the working committee has the ability to offer a recommendation to council on a case-by-case circumstance.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I could follow through the second question, please. Why is universal accessibility not a focus for year one? Understanding they're all priorities, but recognizing the AOD requirements for 2025, recognizing we have so many businesses, especially in our downtown, that are not barrier free, and we have so many citizens of our town who cannot gain access to these businesses, cannot function well. I would really prefer to see that being a strong focus for year one. Is there a reason why it wasn't included?
No, not at all. Actually, the opportunity that we have this evening would be to potentially gather further direction for staff to set in place their work for the upcoming year's budget request. And if there is a desire to support accessibility, there's nothing to stop staff from incorporating in the first year budget an allowance for the pool of money such that accessibility could be operationalized and it could be part of the year one. So there's certainly a way forward here on that.
Well, that's encouraging, because I also know citizens in our town who are living in apartments that don't work for them. So we go to Attainable, the ability to adapt an apartment with accessibility improvements is huge. And final question, downtown waterfront revitalization rebate 1B. So when we talk about for heritage designated buildings, and well, we have some that would provide limited opportunity, because some of them have been actually recently totally revitalized, which is very, very good to see. But could we also make a decision to include properties of interest in the town as well as the already heritage designated buildings?
Yes, most definitely. That is actually there. I'm glad that you asked the question, because it gives me an opportunity to expand further. What we would be able to do is they would fall under rebate 1A as a non-heritage building, because they're not designated under the Heritage Act. But again, the role of staff in terms of bringing the CIP to life is to be able to engage with them and say, look, you could do a little bit more here. Why don't you take advantage of the complementary program that we have to engage with a heritage professional to give you some further advice about heritage thematic design, and we will give you that complimentary rebate too, because that's the rebate 2 trigger. And so then what we do is we try to encourage that to happen by putting together rebate 1A, rebate 2, and the role of staff to try to encourage the landowner to do that. And again, my own experience having pounded the streets of Main Street is you can be successful getting that to happen.
Okay, thanks, Rory.
Welcome.
So we get a member of the public, Jennifer Miller, stands up. Jennifer, did you have a question, comment? Oh, there you are.
I do. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Rory, and to the town staff for great work. It's really exciting to see this modernized. Rory, the question is a bit of a broad one. With your experience as a consultant and as a staff planner, what's your experience seeing how council determines how much money to set aside for this program each year? Have you seen anything creative about percentages or anything else? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I've seen like Belleville is a very recent example where the mayor came out very strongly and said, I want to build a 1,000 housing units and I'm going to put as much resources behind it as possible. And then he said, planning department, I need you to create me an affordable housing CIP. And then when the planning department created that and went to council for funding in the budget year, the mayor again was a very strong advocate in putting a large sum of money behind it, and was happy to do so. So there was definitely, some political interest there. So again, that's fresh in my memory from just recent history. I've also seen some municipalities, in different financial circumstances say, we don't have that much of a reserve fund right now. We can really only, out of all the other competing interests we have in this municipality, put in maybe $30,000 or $50,000 to our reserve fund. But let's do that, and let's open up the programs. Let's see what interest we receive. And year one will be a bit of an exploratory year for us. And if we see a lot of interest, then we can build a queue. And then let's work with those individual landowners, those interested landowners, and put them in a queue. And then when we get to year two of our CIP and we get to the budget request, we have a better sense. Oh, well, through the limited first year, we were able to move forward 2 or 3, maybe 4 things that changed over. We've got 7 or 8 that are lined up for year 2. We have that information. Council is aware of that information. And there's a desire then among council of that year to then say, okay, let's put more money behind this program. We're seeing the benefits of these programs. This year, we're going to put in $120,000 or $150,000. We realize this council, we have competing priorities, but we're going to put some money behind this. And that, I think, is what makes CIPs an active and dynamic type of program. And again, will require staff's involvement, day to day, year to year, to support it, to fully support it coming to life.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Are there any other members of the public would like to ask a question tonight? I'm not seeing any. Rory, are you sticking around for our committee of the whole meeting to ask further questions from council, or?
Yes, Mr. Chair. By all means, that is my role. So I will be definitely present at the time of deliberating.
Great. In that case, I'll save my my questions for then. Last call for any questions for this public meeting tonight. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Rory and Megan. I was interested in under the program Downtown Waterfront Revitalization, that you had a split option there, Rebate 1A and Rebate 1B. Was there any consideration to doing something similar in the housing area where you had a for-profit developer and a not-for-profit housing developer, that we could split the rebates, maybe incentivize the not-for-profit developer at a higher rate than the for-profit? Is there any, have you seen anything like that? Or the precedent set, if we adopt this in Rebate 1A and Rebate 1B, we could move that into that sphere. There's nothing stopping us.
Through the chair, that's actually an excellent question. It's because we've been doing a number of these affordable housing CIPs. We've been able to benefit from a lot of lesson learned recently, and we did speak to both for-profit and nonprofit housing developers. And the nonprofit housing developers tell us this: we know how to get money from CMHC. They have the big program. We know how to do these developments so that they work out for us and our pro forma. Our challenge is twofold. One, being able to access the land that we need, pardon me. And our biggest challenge is accessing the land that we need so that we can buy a piece of property, then do the development. What they've said is, at that point, your affordable housing CIP simply sweetens the pot. It doesn't make anything better for us. It just, perhaps if we had to choose between you and someone else, all things being equal, we'd go with you guys. And so we know that they're out there. We know that they have certain capacity. They can only do so much with the resources they have. And with the private developers, they've been very frank. They said in the housing market that we're in, there is no way that we are going to give anyone a cut rate on rent and lose out unless there's some form of rent subsidy that's being provided that makes the numbers work for us. As a result of that, that's kind of how these CIBs have been calibrated. And so although we see them as separate entities, kind of having separate kind of perspectives on things, at the end of the day, the program works irrespective of whether or not they're a for-profit or nonprofit developer. And that is something we learned a few years ago, and we've been able to bring that knowledge to bear into this design.
That's a very good answer, by the way. Thank you. Mr. Chair, could I have one more? Thank you. In the full report, not on this slide deck, under the tax incentive equivalent rebate area, when you were talking about that, you offer some advice, or the report does, which I didn't see much advice throughout the report. I saw recommendations. But you said something like the town should be cognizant of any significant increase in annual municipal operating costs as a result of the redevelopment of the property. So I think what you're offering is advice saying, okay, you're going to reduce the tax rate over the 10 years. You've got 4 of them going. Keep your eye on that revenue. It seemed like a no-brainer. We're always keeping an eye on revenue projections out over the years. But is there some reason you wanted to bring that to the town's attention? You're familiar with what I'm referring to?
I think so. I think because tax increment is a very different program than all the others. If it works in the way it's supposed to work, one, the amount that's being offered is very significant and generous. Number 2 is you're locking yourselves into a 10-year deal, and those tax increment programs are the only ones of that nature. Nothing else in the CIP is of that scale, and across Ontario, any other CIP that has a tax increment program is the same thing. It's a very substantial benefit and has a locked-in period for the municipality. So it was just simply making sure that there was an understanding that we keep our eyes on the dollars. And I think Smiths Falls is a very responsible municipality, and it's not to be worried about. But we thought it was important to mention it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks. Any further questions, comments from the public? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I'll have, this is going to be on our agenda at the Committee of the Whole, so I was hoping to hear more from the public, but I'll have some comments during the Committee of the Whole.
Good, thanks, Councillor Brennan. Seeing no other questions or comments, thank you for attending and participating in the virtual statutory public meeting for the Community Improvement Plan. Any participants seeking additional information regarding this project are encouraged to reach out to Senior Planner or the Planning Clerk. This concludes the public meeting portion of the special committee of the whole meeting, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Allen, that the committee adjourn its proceedings at 6:08 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called committee meeting, seconded by Councillor Alfred. All those in favor? So that's carried. So we'll take a 5-minute recess and